later. And then I'd like to introduce Renata, who is from the Bernard Sunley Foundation. So.
Right. Thank you, Jeanette. I'll take over, will I?
Yes, please.
Wonderful, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renata. I'm the Grants Manager at the Bernard Sunley Foundation, and I'm here to talk to you today about our Capital Grants Programme. And next page there, Jeanette.
Oh, it's not letting me change it. I think you're going to have to change it. Oh,
there we
go. Is that you or me?
I think that might have been me. We'll see how we get on. Okay, so who we are. Let me see if I can. Okay, great. I think that's me. So the foundation was established in 1960 by Bernard and Mary Sunley. We're a family grant-making foundation, and today the majority of the board are actually family members, with the eldest being the daughter of Bernard and Mary Sunley. We have awarded to date, as of the last financial year, over 126 million since being established. And those are to charities across England and Wales. The focus of the funding is on projects delivering community support or providing facilities for those most in need. And in the last financial year, we awarded 367 grants totaling 4.2 million. What we fund. So as I mentioned, this is we're a capital funder, and our programme really focuses on bricks and mortar. So that's new buildings, extensions to buildings, refurbishment of buildings, updating or new recreational spaces, and purchase of freehold buildings or land. We also fund new minibuses and other vehicles such as minivans that support the charity's core purpose. So we support charities or CIOs registered with the Charity Commission for England and Wales, and churches and other places of worship with a strong secular community focus. We also support a range of organisations with exempt or accepted status as recognised by the Charity Commission, such as specialist schools, scout and guide groups, housing associations, cooperatives and community benefit societies which are registered by the FCA. What we don't fund. Now, these are two quite long lists of slides about what we don't fund. So I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly, but please do check our website if you want to double check to see if you are eligible, so your charity or your project. So types of ineligible applicants. Charities registered outside England or Wales. So CASCs, KICs or unregistered community groups. Town or parish councils. Churches or other religious bodies with no or limited secular activity. NHS hospitals or charities fundraising on their behalf. The independent or mainstream schools, colleges, universities, or the charities fundraising on their behalf. Charities with an annual income of 10 million and over, or newly established charities with no previous annual accounts. Okay, I see that note. Thank you, Shire Sounds. Charities that have applied to us unsuccessfully within the previous 12 months, and charities applying for a new grant before an existing pledge grant has been paid. And of course, individuals, because we're an organisation funder. So types of ineligible projects. So projects with a total cost of 10 million and over aren't eligible to apply. Okay, thank you, Sophie. Projects between 5 million and 10 million, you should really contact us to get permission to apply so we can have a chat about your organisation and your project. Projects with total costs of less than £10,000. That was recently updated. Up to last year, we did fund projects that had a total cost of over £5,000. That was recently updated. We also don't support capital fees, so this is including building surveys, planning applications or feasibility studies. Core or programme costs such as salaries, running and repair costs, websites and other IT, rent, utility bills, etc. We don't fund medical or research medical equipment. We used to some time ago, but that ceased about 5 years ago. Fittings such as electrical appliances and furniture, and equipment such as IT infrastructure and AV systems, work tools, etc. This can be a long list, so if you're unsure, please do contact us. And very importantly, we don't fund second-hand vehicles. This comes up all the time. When we mean a new vehicle, we mean a brand new vehicle, not new to the organisation. And heritage or conservation projects with no or limited community benefit. Okay, how we fund. Right, so we don't fully fund projects, that's really important. We're a part funder and we give a proportion towards the overall cost of your project. However, that's not done on percentages. So we support with 3 levels of grants. Our large grant starts at £20,000. We have medium grants of £10,000 or £15,000 typically. And our small grants are usually start at £2,000 and we go up to £5,000. So when we pledge a grant, it's for 2 years from the date of the grant offer, and we will release the funds when the shortfall has been fully raised and your project is ready to go ahead. And we fund generally under 4 categories: community, education, health and social welfare. However, your organisation may fit one or maybe all those categories. We recommend people apply to the category that best fits their organisation, but it won't affect the type of funding you receive or the assessment of your work. And we fund. So large and medium grants, obviously the most coveted part, are projects, so they're usually to projects that cost over £100,000. But projects considered for large grants really typically cost over £400,000, and I think it's quite important to point out. So we have 3 trustee meetings held across the year at which these grants are considered. But applications are assessed and agreed upon usually within 6 months. Now, obviously, that timeline can change depending on the nature of your project, whether things have altered in the time that you applied to us and so on. And sometimes that can go up a little bit higher, but you'll have contact with us certainly within that 6 months of applying. And our large grant projects are usually visited by a staff member or a trustee. So our small grants is our largest area. So projects usually cost between £10,000 and £100,000. Grants, as I said, are between £2,000 with a maximum of £5,000. And these are monthly, so they're agreed by trustees every month. The results are usually within approximately 3 months. We do aim for sooner, we do our best. They represent about 50% of our annual grants, and as you can see, in the last financial year, 183 of 367 grants were actually small grants. So where we fund, this is just to give everybody a bit of an overview. As you can see, we fund throughout England and Wales in different proportions, but we were quite pleased that in the last financial year, more than half of the charities, 52%, were actually new to the foundation, which is great. And we do actually end up funding quite a lot of organisations that have applied to us in the past. We've been around for quite some time, so we'll often find organisations coming back to us after 10 or maybe even 20 years having been previously applied or funded by us. As you can see with the percentages, like a lot of national funders, our funding is disproportionately focused on the south, but we have been making a very concerted effort to try and spread the funding a bit more widely, particularly to Wales and to the north and the east. As you can see, there's slightly lower amounts. In terms of London, you'll see that's deliberately low. The trustees feel that there's quite a lot of funders already in London, and that we want to focus on the rest of the country where it's actually harder to raise funds, and our grants, which are relatively small in comparison to other national funders, are they can go further and make a bigger difference. So I just want to give you a couple of examples in Northamptonshire of projects that we have funded. So in our community category, so this is our largest by far. It encompasses quite a number and range of charities. So the types of work we typically do will be building or refurbishment of village halls, scouts huts, youth clubs, community centres, boxing clubs, farm and outdoor learning centres, sports centres, pavilions, playing fields, playgrounds, that sort of thing. So this is very common projects that we get all the time. And of course, minibuses are quite popular in this category as well as other vehicles. So an example is, I'm sure most people must be well aware of the Northamptonshire Association of Youth Clubs. So back in 2015, we granted £50,000 towards their upgrade of Meeting Hall at Kings Park. But we actually have supported them over a long period of time with different capital projects because of the nature of their their buildings and their sites needing continuous upgrading. So education. So this category tends to be primarily focused on special needs schools. So improvements in new facilities at those schools, or the purchase of accessible minibuses for children and young people. But we also award grants to educational nature centres and new education and learning centres at museums, galleries and arts organisations, although that does tend to be a very small percentage of the annual funding. So a good example of what we funded in Northamptonshire is the Good Life. So in 2020, we granted £25,000 towards the Place to Be, which is an accessible and disability-friendly cafe and retail space. Our health category is actually one of our smaller categories, but we do tend to focus on the building and refurbishment projects for care homes, hospices, day centres and other facilities that provide relief and sanctuary for patients, families and those with special needs. So the focus here is, of course, on helping charities providing an excellent standard of care and support within their communities. So Cransley Hospice, I'm sure, is also well known in Northamptonshire, and in 2016 we provided actually quite a small grant of £2,000 towards improvements to their family day room. Social welfare, so this tends to be quite a large area of funding for us. So we support projects for veterans, the elderly, ex-offenders, those in prison, and schemes that enable people with mental and physical disabilities to live fuller lives in the community. And a good example and recent one of that is actually the Oakfield community. And in 2019, we granted £10,000 towards the creation of new independent flats in Yardley Hastings for adults with learning difficulties. And we actually recently supported them again with a large grant for another independent flats project in their other centre, which hasn't yet been completed. So just to keep with the focus on the funding in Northamptonshire. So since 1960, so we've had 188 applications submitted, at least that's recorded on our database, but bearing in mind the long period of time and multiple databases and systems that we've gone through that may not be wholly accurate. However, we do know that 126 grants were approved, 55 declined, 7 withdrawn. Withdrawn can be for a number of reasons, of course, where a project could have been approved, but then the actual project itself fell through, or whether there was some issues once an applicant had been had actually applied to us with the project. So we've had 48 grant holders out of 83 applicants overall, and 81 of those have been small grants. As you can see, again, our largest area really is a small grant scheme. We've had 14 medium grants and actually 31 large grants awarded, and overall more than 2.8 million has been awarded across all categories. And just to give some very recent examples, in the last financial year, we had 5 out of 9 applicants were granted a combined total of £80,000. So that was actually 1 small grant, 3 medium grants and 1 large grant. Now, how to apply, very important part. So if you're unsure about your charity or project, please do contact us. We're a very small team, but we will get back to you. We do encourage people, because we're a small team, to please read our online guidance first, which has just very recently been updated. So we hope that will be helpful for people checking their charity or project. So you can email us or call us. So both those, our email address and our phone number is on the footer of our website. So unfortunately, we don't accept applications by email or post. We're aware that this can be tricky for some types of applicants, and we do apologise for that. Again, it's down to the size of our team in the office. There's only 3 of us and 2 of us dealing with applicants. So if you have issues, please call us and we'll see what we can do. In terms of actually applying online, there's a 2-step process. So step 1 is the eligibility check. So we have refined this very recently and we hope it'll be helpful. This is the steps to go through to double check that your charity, organisation and your project is actually eligible to apply. So save all of us time and money in terms of fundraising. Step 2 then is the actual application form itself. It is a one-stage process. Unlike some organisations, we don't run a stage 1 form or stage 2 form. It's just the one form. So please do fill out everything on that form. It will seem like a simple form. It's done that deliberately so that we can, it's more accessible to the range of charities that we do support. We support a range of very small volunteer-run charities, all the way up to professionally run charities. So we do try to strike a middle ground with that form. And we have, in the last 2 years, we're quite proud of that we've been able to establish a save and resume functionality, which I think is quite important, so that people can start a form, save it, go away, check your questions, get other people to maybe log on and fill out sections, so that the work can be shared around if you've got the extra capacity in your organisation. And if we need more information, we will contact you. We do this all the time. So this is why we do encourage people to do supply as much information as you can on the form at the first instance. And we also welcome major project updates by email using your grant reference number so that we can track you. So updates might be, you know, if you've applied to us a couple of weeks ago and you've suddenly been awarded a grant, or perhaps you weren't actually successful with quite a large grant application that you were hoping from a different funder, please do contact us, because we will attach the information to your application and that will be looked at when we're assessing them. Now, we've just wanted to run through a couple of tips for applying to us. Now, in terms of our contacts, as I said, we're sort of a national to England and Wales funder. We're London-based, like a lot of funders are, and quite a small team. So bearing in mind that we won't necessarily have the local knowledge that like local community foundations would certainly have about your organisations. So when we approach your application, we'll need help to understand the context and locality that you're in. So one of the ways that we assess applications, extremely common to most funders and it's good best practice, is checking your sort of your official records and your presence online, and what sort of information is publicly available about you. So, for example, if you are a registered charity, for example, you know, scout groups or churches may not, but if you are a registered charity with the Charity Commission, is your record up to date? Has your treasurer, or if you have an external accountant, have they been submitting your accounts and your submissions on time? Because if your information is late, and that's not a good sign of good governance, and that's something that will immediately halt your assessment, and we will need to get in touch with you to find out what's going on. We usually do our best to do that. If your track record is not very good, for example, in the last 2 to 3 years, you've been consistently very late in submitting your financial information, that will give us pause for thought, and perhaps you may end up getting declined without getting in touch with us. So that's really, really important. So what sort of information is available online about your charity? So as a national funder, we will be looking online for information about you. Now, bearing in mind, if you're a small organisation like a village hall, you may not even have a website. You may feature on the local parish website with a page, or you may have a Facebook page that so that you can let people know about your activities, or perhaps you're even on Twitter. But whatever you have, please double check to see that it is up to date, that it isn't a couple of years out. And this is quite important when applying to organisations like us, so we can see what sort of presence you have, how you communicate with your beneficiaries, and so on. Again, this can be challenging for very small local groups, because often it's done by word of mouth, and you may know all the beneficiaries you need to know in your county, but we will need to understand that. So So what sort of information does your trustees annual report say about your charity? So again, this is probably for the slightly larger organisations. However, I've seen some excellent examples from actually quite small volunteer-run organisations where they do have an annual account of what they've been up to in the previous year. So the TAR, as we call the trustees annual report, is invaluable information. It's your public record to organisations such as ourselves, which are not regionally or locally based. So we can find out about what your organisation has been up to, your achievements, your performance for the year, your challenges, also really important. It doesn't have to be something really long, something very glossy and beautiful with images like, you know, huge organisations like Cats Protection or something. But it can just be very basic information about just exactly what your activities have been. That's really, really important information. So do consider what your public record is of the previous year about your charity. So charities reserves position, I'm sure those of you who've been fundraising for a while will know all about this, but it is really important to explain to us about your charities reserves position. We don't specifically ask this question because it's not necessarily relevant to all our organisations on our application form, but we do expect to have some sort of information somewhere. If you have a trustees annual report, we would expect to see just even a sentence about your reserves position in your financial review. And if not, then please to ask the people who would have the information, if that's not you, to summarise to us what your reserves position is, because we will be wanting to see if you have reserves allocated to your project. And if you haven't, that's a big question mark for us. Obviously, if you're a very tiny organisation, it just may be that you only have a very small amount to keep the show on the road. That's understandable, but we will need to understand that. If you're a larger kind of medium-sized organisation, we would certainly want to know about your reserves position, and absolutely large organisations normally have this information provided. And just the last point, again from us, we want to understand that your charity and your project is valued locally. So we want to understand that, have you raised or are you planning to raise funds locally? They may not, this may not be feasible for some organisations if you're working in an area of extreme poverty, and perhaps the support you get from your community is actually through volunteering or other means. That's absolutely fine. Just please do explain it to us. We do want to understand if you are raising funds, what those plans are, even if it's, you know, just a kind of a bag pack at your local supermarket, or perhaps you're going to try crowdfund for the first time, but your expectations are low. But that is quite important to us. And I think that is the end. Yes, it is. There we go. I can leave that back up on the screen if you think, Jeanette. Oh, can't hear you there. You could. There we go.
Lovely. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind moving that out of the way so folks can see you when they're asking questions, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. Let me just see. Stop share. There we go.
Okay, so thank you for that. So we have a question from Mandy here. Is any match funding required for large projects?
So we don't specifically do match funding. So we interpret match funding as sort of like, you raise 10, we'll give you 10. That's not how we do our funding. We're a part funder or partial funder. So if your project's going to cost £150,000, for example, you might get £10,000 from us. We won't expect, 10K to necessarily be raised. If you're just starting out on your journey, we will be looking for a very robust fundraising plan, so a list of all your sources about where you're going to actually raise your funds from, and we should at that point still be able to continue with your application as long as we consider that the fundraising plan is viable. But if you're starting out and you're not sure and you kind of want us to be the first funder, we'll probably end up having a bit of a chat with you to see where you're at. Again, we'll come back to you. Do you have any funds raised locally, or if you're actually allocating any funds from your reserves in that scenario? But in terms of general funds, it's I suppose most funders, we're not unlike other funders. If you've already raised a certain amount of funding towards it, that's usually a good sign. But again, that doesn't exclude you if you've got nothing raised. Is that okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay. Do you have any more questions from anybody?
If anyone's got projects they'd like to talk through very briefly, we've got time for that.
Oops. Anybody?
I have one. Sorry, I can't find the hand. My hand up. I've lost it on the screen somehow. We've got quite an interesting project that we're looking at. We currently have the building occupied by a subtenant at the front of one of our buildings, but we're looking to refurbish that into accommodation for our users, because we have a lot of people who travel, not just nationally but internationally. We also have a lot of disabled participants who again have to travel a long way but might want to spend a weekend here, for example. So we were looking at possibly how that type of project would fit into the fund.
It depends on the type of charity you are. Who are you applying? What sort of organisation are you?
We're a registered charity.
And what do you do?
We are I hate to say a skate park because we're so much more than that, but generally we are kind of the biggest urban sports or action sports centre in the UK for BMX, skateboarding, scootering, etc. But we also do a lot of community work within our social mission with people with disabilities, for example, or young people, nurturing them into employment through volunteering, etc. So yeah, when I say a skate park, people just see something on a skate park going up and down, but yeah, much more than that.
Okay, well, that sounds very interesting. I think certainly, not necessarily this, as you can imagine, that although we do support sports and so on, that the skating side of stuff isn't something that always gets funded. I think the community side that you're talking about there does sound very, very interesting. So in terms of actually converting your premises for accommodation and to be accessible for people with disabilities, I think that's projects, that's type of projects that we've for other organisations, different types of organisations, we've certainly supported in the past. Do you have a cost for it?
No, it's just a project that I'm sort of looking at the moment. We didn't know the building was going to become vacant, so we've always had the vision that if it did, that would be the next step. So we now know it's going to become vacant. So it's kind of we're not starting the project till September, October time, but obviously this opportunity come up. But we're also looking at it to help with emergency accommodation when it's not in use for our users, for the local council. That's something we've talked to them about, and is always in need apparently. So again, we can help the community in that respect as well.
Okay, Mandy. Well, I think what I'd do is I'd advise you to email us when you're a bit clearer about exactly what you'll be doing with your project. And just explain to us sort of who you are. Obviously, have your charity reference number somewhere so that we can look you up and check, and just explain what that project is and who you're going to be working with in terms of the community side of things. And that would be the best way. We'll get in touch with you then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, Heather, would you like to ask Renata a question?
Yeah, it was just really on the funds, you being a part funder, and you talked about having a fundraising strategy. So would you expect us to have raised all the rest of the money before your money is released, or is it just more about a plan? Sorry, I wasn't quite sure what you...
Hi, Heather. I think that's probably two things you're thinking of there. So in terms of when you apply to us, the fundraising plan is how you're going to raise the entire shortfall. So that would include obviously your approach to Burn It Sunley. But if you do get awarded a grant from us, we won't release the funds until the full shortfall has been pledged, because we're pledging towards the entirety of the project as opposed to sort of certain elements of it. We don't tend to sort of own a piece like a room or a toilet or that type of thing. We don't tend to own bits and pieces of your actual project. We'll contribute towards the entirety of it.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that's what you meant. Just clarifying. Thanks for that. Thank you.
That's okay.
Okay, Liz has a question. Would you like to unmute yourself, Liz, or would you like me to read out the question?
Hi. Got a face as well. Okay. Hi. So I work for Milton Keynes Museum, and we've got two lovely, beautiful new galleries, gallery spaces which are ready to go. And now we're fundraising for to complete the exhibitions that go in there. One will be about the ancient history of the area and the second will be about modern Milton Keynes and the people who live there today, and that's going to be a very community focused exhibition now that we've got city status. Very exciting. So my question is, do you fund exhibition fit out? Does that kind of fall under your capital requirement?
Unfortunately not, Liz. We'd consider that more like equipment because it's not actually attached to the building. So okay. it's not what we'd consider bricks and mortar. But if you needed to sort of renovate your sort of learning space, you know, with knock down a wall or add a wall or do sort of, you know, brand new lighting, that's the sort of thing we could consider. And in terms of lighting, actually, in terms of museums, it's a bit of a crossover there. It's a bit like theatres, isn't it? Where it's actually the functional building lighting and also sort of spotlights for exhibitions and so on. I think you need to get in touch with us if it was something like that. But generally, exhibitions tend not to get funded.
Okay. So once I do finish funding the exhibitions, then I'll come back to you for our learning centre.
Perfect. That's exactly it. Get in touch with us then.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
It's okay. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to ask? Can't see any more hands. Let's have a look. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, I'd just like to thank Renata for joining us today. And thank you all for joining us. Just to say, or just to reiterate, the session will be uploaded to the North Northants Council website. So if any of your colleagues haven't been able to attend today, they can catch up with this. We're a few people short, so hopefully those who didn't make it today will be able to catch up later. And the other thing is just a reminder, if you'd be so kind as to fill in our questionnaire for the prize draw, that would be really helpful. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, and we look forward to receiving your applications.
Thank you. Well, hang on, was there a hand there? Oops, or was that a goodbye?
That was a goodbye, I think.
Heather, did you have another question? Or
just making sure the slides normally get sent out. They're just useful to have, the slides from the presentation.
Would you be able to share those with us, Renata?
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
That'd be lovely.
Okay, we'll make sure those get sent out, Heather.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.